Hey folks, welcome back. Again, we're in the NACTEC shop in Nome, and we're going to talk about engine service. In other words, there was a reason why you wanted to take the engine apart. Something was wrong. This could be it. In other words, this is a compression gauge. Maybe there's problems with the cylinder, maybe the rings, maybe the head gasket. And these are awesome, these little gauges, because you can thread it in the plug hole and pull it over, and it'll give you a reading. This is reading like 75, just under 75. And again, check your manual. The manual will tell you what the compression is supposed to be. And if that compression is below what they are talking and say, oh, something's wrong, then you're going to need to disassemble the engine and fix it, okay? So this one would be okay. And it is leaking. I see this is leaking a little bit, okay? But what, say we got a low reading, say we got like 45. So we'd end up disassembling the engine, and we're putting on our scientific brain, and we're looking for the problem. This cylinder here is from the Yamaha 700 engine, and it would start up and run for about 2 seconds. It made this hideous screeching noise, okay? So something obviously was wrong. It needed to be disassembled to be fixed, okay? And there's some big scratches, big cutouts, big gouges in here, okay? So that would affect the compression. How do I know if I see a little ring up on top of here where the piston is stopping and then going back down, and there's some wear inside the bore here? How do I know if it's too much? Use one of these fancy little rigs, okay, called a telescoping gauge. So all you do is spring loaded, you push these together and snug this up. Again, be gentle with these tools, okay? And then you release it, you hear it click, and then you snug it a little bit, and that's going to tell you the size of the bore on the top. Then I take a caliper, and again, it depends on you what you would prefer, whether you'd like to have it on metric or standard, imperial, SAE, inches, fractions of an inch, parts of an inch. And I'm reading 2.7445. So what I would do then is go to the manual, and it's going to say if it's worn, if this is bigger than a certain size, this would need to be replaced, okay? Maybe I measured the top, the top is still within the measurements, but I also want to measure the bottom. And the difference between the wear from the top of the cylinder to the bottom of the cylinder is called runout. And I get 2.7710. Okay? So again, look in the manual. The manual will tell you if the part is too worn to still be used to put it back together again. It makes absolutely no sense to rebuild an engine with worn out parts. Again, something else is there are measurements on here. It's really important on the piston that you measure the thickness of the gap where the rings are. And my thought, from my experience, is if you're going to redo the engine, you're going to redo things, it just makes total sense to put in a new piston and rings. Okay? Makes total sense to do that. You're that far, you're that deep into the engine, I recommend you don't reuse those. They're not that expensive, okay? Something else you got to be really watching for, make sure that you put the rings on the right orientation. And again, the manual will tell you, because a lot of times these rings are different shaped. So the top ring is different than the bottom ring. So make sure you get those in the right spot. Again, another one of those here is the crankshaft from the Briggs engine. This is called the journal, the crank journal. Again, you would measure that, look at that number, go back to the manual, and see if it is still within spec, see if it can be reused. Now, something that's kind of cool what you can do with these is you can actually send these off and they put them in a machine and they'll cut this down, they'll cut the journal down smaller, and then you can get an oversized bearing. So it might be cheaper to do it that way. So again, you're always looking at the manual. You want to reference the repair manual on your engine. It will tell you the specifications, the wear limits that are in there. Again, I was just working on a Yamaha 700, and I could see that the rod and the bearing and all was just total junk. So what I did is I actually sent the crank, the rod off and had it rebuilt. And many times it's a lot cheaper to rebuild than it is to buy new. I think new was like almost $700 and the rebuild was $280. So you'd have to check on that and see which would work the best. So, you know, which is more economical. Yeah, so a lot of these engines, and even the Briggs & Stratton, this Briggs & Stratton is actually metric. The fasteners in this engine are metric. So again, reference the manual. A lot of the manuals will actually give you them in both. They'll give in both. So what I can do then is I take the caliper and I open it up, and right now I'm in inches. So again, it's going to read, again, be gentle. Don't force anything. Now I get 2.7530. Then what I can do is I look in the book, oh, it's in metric. I just press the button. And it says 69.92 millimeters. Okay. So again, what you're wanting to do is measure the piston, measure the crank, measure the bore, so that you know that the parts, whether they can be reused or not, whether they're still serviceable. That's what they talk about when are they still serviceable. If not, look in the manual, replace them, and if they're still serviceable, great. Maybe they can be remachined and still used again. So